We'll start whenever you see Anand.
I know, I think we can start.
Shall we?
My, yeah, yeah.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our weekly show, Yin and Yang of Risk and Resilience, brought to you by Udvita Technologies and DVD Training and Consultancy. This is fifth episode. We had planned 8 in all, and after doing 50%, going halfway through, we decided to experiment differently and we shifted these sessions to Saturdays. So we will be starting now onwards on Saturdays, 10 a.m. IST. The topic today is sustainability, BCM and risk, interconnectedness, and Anand will take over. I'll just do the intros. I'll request Anand to speak about himself quickly, about me, about 4 decades in the industry, 2 decades in BCM and resilience. I've played multiple different roles. I've dirtied my hands myself. I've done it myself being a practitioner. And then I've been a trainer, consultant, auditor, assessor, author, speaker. Ninth book, my experiments as a LinkedIn top voice will be released globally on 15th. I won multiple awards nationally, globally. This is our volunteer work. Learning and sharing is forever. I'm a lifelong learner myself, and that's what we two are attempting, that we share while we speak, but I'm very sure we also learn in this process. So over to you, Anand, with your introduction, and then take us through the session, please.
Thank you, Daman, and very good morning to Krishnan and anyone else who's going to be taking a look at this session later. So I am currently the co-founder and CEO of Utpata Technologies. It's a risk consulting and technologies startup based out of Hyderabad. In my previous avatar, I've been an ex-chief risk compliance officer of an NYSE listed company. I have over 25 years of post-qualification experience. I've worked in industries, primarily pharma, followed by auto, and now with my startup, the ITS services industry. From a vantage point of being a chief risk officer and also directly participating in multiple programs alongside risk, I've had opportunities to work very closely in business finance, insurance, IFC SOX, compliance, information security, and business model. This kind of puts me in a very unique situation where I'm in a position to connect the dots with respect to several um, disciplines of risk. And today's topic that we're going to be talking about is again one such very popular, current, and topical subject, which is sustainability and ESG. But I'm going to be talking about this in two parts. One, how does this connect back to the topic of risk and resilience? And secondly, what is this entire animal called sustainability and ESG? And what are those core elements that companies are currently working on or thinking about or pressurized to work towards, right? Directly or indirectly. And that's what we will try to cover today in the next 45 minutes or so. As always, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have in Krishnan, and then we can anyway cover it during Q&A at the end. It's not. So I'll start with something that always has to be uh, important before we take up any work on risk management, which is the context. And if you're looking at it from the perspective of a firm or a company or an organization, it always starts with what is relevant to our efforts on risk management or what is relevant business risks. And it all connects back to your objectives, which in turn flow from your strategies, which may directly or indirectly flow from your mission, vision, and values. Any scorecard that we take today, any long-term initiative that companies take, they are essentially flowing in from your mission, vision, and values. Companies have been reinventing themselves every 10, 20 years. And we're seeing a lot of organizations currently also making these changes as they understand the external business context. So today, the idea here is to connect it back to the topic on hand, which is sustainable CMS. When we look at objective setting, it primarily happens in three dimensions. The first dimension could be that these are set and communicated annually. And when I say annually, it essentially means that what is your annual scorecard? How will your performance measurement for the next 12 months, 18 months be? Um, what is going to be going into your, you know, uh, variable pay workings? What is it that you're probably going to be communicating to the street in case you have this practice of sharing your guidance? So all of these are in many ways interconnected. The unit of measure is usually a 12-month to an 18 horizon. The second one, which is usually carried out by the business and strategy teams, is to engage in a 5-year kind of a strategy exercise. And they true it up every year once they get insights from the annual plans. So the annual plans essentially flow from the strategy plans, but many times one influences the other, right? And these are set, these are communicated over the next 3 to 5 years. You might have longer term scorecards created and presented. You may have long term incentive plans aligned to this. You may have some sort of high level communication in your annual reports, in your investor presentations, talking about what is it that the company is looking at in the near future. And finally, off late, right, in the last, I would say 24 months to 36 months, especially in India, increasingly, companies are starting to think on longer horizons, right? So, uh, partly influenced by stakeholders' expectations, but largely from the point of view of understanding which direction organizations want to go. Companies have started talking about 10 or 20-year objectives. Some of them are very, very narrow. When I say narrow, it could be as simple as, I want to be in the Fortune 500 by 2025, 2020, 2030, right? Or it could be that I would like to be, you know, among the top 10 leading players in X industry or Y industry. Now, these are typically the kind of objectives that we would have seen maybe about 5 years back or even earlier. But of late, I think the way these dimensions of objectives are set are a little different. So, how does then risk management and people, like me, like you, like Daman, whoever is looking at helping organizations or working directly on risk management? So, how do they look at risks through their lens, right? So, essentially, if I'm looking at a 12-month horizon, looking at something which is shorter term, I'm looking at elements of competition. I'm looking at elements of legislation, maybe, excuse me, commodity, forex risks, operational risks. And this is where risk teams and DCM teams collaborate. They try to identify matters of importance. They look at what is your P&L at risk, what is your revenue at risk, what are the chances of not meeting our short-term scorecards, etc. As you start expanding this, I'm sorry, to longer-term horizons like 3 to 5 years, the risk teams have to add on. And then here they also start collaborating with the strategy teams. And they start understanding economic cycles, right? So you have 5-year economic cycles, you have political cycles, you have the regulatory shifts. Currently, as we speak, in most of the key democracies across the globe, Asia, US, a lot of this political regulatory shifts are happening. Probably wait for most of the key democracies across the globe, Asia, US. A lot of this political regulatory shifts are happening. Probably wait for this. A lot of this political regulatory shifts. I think that there seems to be some additional play happening. I think that there seems to be some additional.
My apologies, I'll fix it soon.
Yeah.
My apologies, I'll fix it soon. My apologies, I'll fix it soon.
I'm just pausing this for now.
My apologies, I'll fix it soon.
I'm just pausing this for now. Pausing this for now.
Sorry about this.
That's okay. So I guess we are good. So what I was saying is, as we speak, even today, whether it's in India, whether it's in US, some of the most key geographies, there are new governments that potentially could get formed that could entirely change the landscape. So a lot of the strategy considerations include political shifts, they include capability issues, they include succession issues, they include any marketplace, customer place changes that might happen. And these have to be factored in as additional risks when it comes to uh, strategy. And then as we move to a slightly longer term horizon, right, you start now looking at issues such as, will there be enough water in my locality, right? Is the power systems going to be working as good as they were working in the past 5 years? How is my workforce shifts going to happen? What kind of demography changes are going to impact my business? How is the geography or the economy going to look like? What aspects of climate change impacts we should consider in the way that our business models are unfolding? And now you're slowly stepping into the horizons of what currently is being called as sustainable, right? And as we understand today, when someone looks at any of, say, your risk registers or your key risks across the company, it is usually a combination of all the. And the reason is that the actions that needs to be taken have to be taken starting now, even if the risks are something that are probably a couple of decades away. The actions have to start taking. And that's where I think today, while each of us operate from our own lens, our lens of functional lenses, which could be uh, environment, health, and safety. It could be a strategy team, a risk or a BCM team, could be a compliance team, for example. I think all of these people, all of these functions need to get together and collaborate, and that has started happening in a very significant. So the rest of the presentation today is going to start talking about them using the lens of sustainability, because we've got to take the largest dimension that is possible, and that in this current case is connected to timeline. So when we talk about interconnectedness, this interconnectedness is now a matter of time scale. Okay? So if I look at, for example, something like compliance, which is marked on that in that red color here, this is a here and now, right? This is to say that as a company, you're operating your business. Are you doing it in the most compliant manner? It's either a yes or a. The moment you move away from the here and now, and you want to look at what's likely to impact us in the next, say, 12 to 18 months, that's where your horizons are shifting to something what traditionally is called as enterprise risk management. And this usually is a 12 to 18-month horizon. You're not beyond it. The concerns are usually short term. They're not looking at really long term issues. Sometimes there is a mix up of both. But the reality is that these are very different trajectories, and different people are responsible for managing the risks along these trajectories traditionally, right? But when I start moving towards the concept of sustainability takes in a slightly larger format. Uh, to me, it is the quality of an ever flourishing organization, right? So this term called ever flourishing organization was, I think, captured by Jim Collins or Marshall, not very sure, one of the two very popular authors, and they mentioned that there are certain qualities that uh, define what an ever flourishing organization is. There are so many companies today that have survived not just decades, but sometimes hundreds of years. And very clearly, for them to have survived this long, they definitely have to have done something right. And sustainability, as the buzzword today and the way that we understand it today, definitely is one underpinning quality for an ever flourishing organization. Now, there are two dimensions to sustainability, the way that currently organizations are talking about. One is a very specific set of uh, topics such as environment, social, and governance. So these are three dimensions or three pillars under which this new language for demonstrating sustainability is coming. It's become extremely popular in the last 24 months. It has always been there for quite some time. But I think organizations have taken a very, very strong, focus to these topics. So much so that it has overshadowed anything else that you and I would probably have traditionally thought about, whether it was BCM, whether it was risk management, whether it was compliance or any other things, right? So the topic of ESG or the topic of sustainability have taken over the agenda, significant component of agendas of board risk committees as well. BCM, the way that we understand today, while it is purely linked to the ability of the business to support its critical operations during times of disasters or crisis, today the word BCM or business continuity or supply continuity, continuity of operations, etc., is very proudly talked about in the context of sustainability as well. And as we go forward, we will see some connects BCM and risk management. But of late, whether you're looking at organization sustainability reports, whether you're talking about the communications made to customers, etc., I think very clearly organizations are connecting sustainability, their ability to have a very strong business continuity management framework for a system. So the way that all of this gets connected, the way that I have understood it, and the way that it might also make sense for all of us to look at, is to look at it from the point of view of time scales. Risks are risks as the horizon expands from immediate, say, the next 12 to 18 months to longer terms to maybe decades. I think the lens that you look at it starts changing accordingly. That's basically how I would this topic of sustainability. Sustainability and ESG are used interchangeably. There is no doubt about it. For a long time, companies have started calling their reports sustainability reports. Until more recently, companies have probably realized that ESG is a sharper, more appropriate element to be called out in the kind of work that they do. Sustainability is a philosophy that says that I continue to do my work, my business, my action, and this could be at a nation's level, this could be at a state's level, this could be at a or at an organization level or a household level, right? Without burdening the environment or the society. So that's the core underpinning, you know, definition of what sustainability is. And this term is equally applied to governments, corporations, and financial institutions, and also to actions by individuals, right? But when we get to the term ESG are some specific criteria of measurements of environment, social, or governance performance of companies, usually companies, and these are carried out by some external parties. They could be credit rating agencies like an S&P. They could be other independent counterparties. We've got EcoVadis, etc., that also come in, and that sits within sustainability, right? And there is yet another term called climate action, which is probably the root cause driver for all of these things that we talk about on sustainability. And this, as a topic, also has got very seriously recognized since the last, I would say, decade or so, from the COP23 summit that was held, in Paris, in the Paris Convention. And if you look at the entire ESG agenda, as we unfold in the next few sets of slides. Climate change is probably the one that really matters. That's the one that can cause destruction or problems that can probably not be reversed, right? Therefore, it's very important for us to declutter the efforts as we are putting in from organization's perspective. While we think sustainability, we think ESG, we have to act climate, climate change, climate, right? So that's basically the overall introduction to an ESG versus sustain. But when I start now looking at myself as an organization and I look at ESG, what exactly does an ESG ready or an ESG compliant or an ESG implemented organization or journey look like, right? So from the point of view of some experts who kind of suggested or given us a path, we picked up this a dozen to 14 point action. Usually, this is something that can be achieved over a 2 year period. They cannot be achieved in a quarter. They cannot be achieved in, right? It starts off with current state assessment and gap analysis, moves on to stakeholder engagement and materiality assessment, moves on to goal setting, which is what a lot of organizations today are doing. And then it moves on to, uh, you know, making those improvements, those reductions on the footprint that each organization might, be responsible for. And then you start looking outwards. You look at your sustainable supply chain initiatives. You look at within individuals, your capacity building and capability development initiatives. And then you start collecting data around what is the kind of efforts that you're putting in, what kind of results are emerging from those efforts. You publish those through your standard documents. The most popular documents today that externally are communicated through companies about their initiatives are the business responsibility and sustainability report reporting by mandated by SEBI, and your sustainability report, which is a voluntary document that a lot of companies align to certain key frameworks such as the GRI or the SASB. Right? And apart from that, there it starts getting a bit technical. Then you start looking at climate action and change. The whole idea here is that as the company grows, it's going to start putting more its footprint on carbon emissions and consumptions and waste is only going to go up, right? But it needs to have a very systematic approach to looking at how, despite the growth, economic growth of the company's footprint can be systematically reduced, brought down to almost zero, if not below zero, not zero, are addressed through these three or four initiatives like the CDP, the TCFD, and the science-based targets, right, SBTR. Apart from this, besides the sustainability report, companies have started moving up the communication chain by integrating their annual report, which usually is for your investors and shareholders, to combine it with the sustainability report and call it in, right? So that's something which is a new trend nowadays. Additionally, I think companies are also getting themselves rated to various agencies, including something like an S&P ESG rating, right? And there are other agencies. There is the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. There's the Morgan Stanley Index. So all of these are driven by, I think, the frameworks that have been set up in the Western markets, both Europe and US, but very objectively and very transparently assessed and communicated their scores. Apart from this, at the end of the day, everything works down to what your core offering is. So if you are in an industry that has fundamentally very, very, very little environmental footprint, then that is something that you can be, you're at an advantage. But if you're in an industry where the emission footprint or carbon footprint is extremely high, you have a lot of work, right, with respect to whatever your core offerings could be product, service. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover three important points from here, three highlighted points. While we could spend an entire day on taking each of these points and going down deeper and understanding what they mean and what order they need, what kind of objectives they help achieve, and how our organizations actually moving on each of this. I'm just going to pick up two or three points for today, and we can always reconvene another time. When I look at uh, stakeholder engagement and materiality assessment, just like the way a risk management heat map is developed, right, or a prioritization is created using a combination of what can impact the company most on, let us say, a likelihood and a severity scale, right? Similarly, we have organizations now reaching out to their stakeholders. Stakeholders could be both internal and external. Stakeholders could be, both individuals as well as organizations. Stakeholders could be people who are directly impacted, such as customers and suppliers, or indirectly impacted, such as investors, right, and society and media, regulations, etc. So the idea here really is that as the company tries to understand what is important to it from its perspective, right, it also tries to understand from the point of view of each of its stakeholders' perspective what is important to them. Now, here what I put is an illustration from one of the Tata Group companies, Tata Consumer Products Limited. This is from their sustainability report, the last sustainability report of FY20. And what this does, and all of the approaches that organizations use are primarily based on this 2 by 2 matrix, which is, the importance to what the company is, and then importance to what stakeholders is. And any section where it is of high importance to both are the areas where typically goal setting happens, right? So when you are looking at sustainability, when you are looking at, and the horizons are very different here as we talked about. These horizons are longer term horizons, and therefore, you have to give yourself that additional time, bandwidth, ability to invest, ability to commit, and then, get onto that path. Based on this materiality assessment, uh, the company would be able to focus on a few material sustainability parameters that are required to be managed. So it could be a carbon footprint, it could be water footprint, waste management, regulatory compliance. For a very, so just take the example of a company like Coke or Pepsi, right? For them, the core ingredient in their product is water, and water is drawn from nature, right, from earth. So their fundamental waterproof footprint is going to be very negative. And if they were to address it from the point of view of sustainability and climate change, right, from a global perspective, then one of their key areas of focus, whether it is from their own point of view, that the cost of water, cost of using water is only going to go up with time, right, directly or indirectly. And the focus of any concerned, uh, bodies, whether it is regulators, whether it is, NGOs, whether it is the communities that are outside who are concerned about the availability of water. All of these people are going to again focus on water as a core issue. So it becomes an area that you may want, right? So that's where the starting point is for goal setting. And goals could be set in multiple areas. Obviously, there are a few areas that are expected to be there for all organizations. You're looking at carbon footprint. So you're looking at the goal of carbon neutrality by 20XX, whatever it is. It could be 2050, it could be 2035, it could be 2070. Each organization should take some goals and then some commitments and invest in those efforts that are required to meet those goals and commitments. Goals could be set in water, goals could be set in waste areas, goals could be set up on your core product. Your product, for example, maybe using substances that are harmful to nature, environment, and you may want to ensure that the product is free from such chemicals and toxins. Or it could be that your product includes material that is sourced, in not appropriate ways, or sourced from uh, locations or from uh, farmlands. Let's say if it's a food product, right? Where certain societal norms are not probably met, right, in terms of fair or adequate compensation, etc. Social conditions of farmers or workers, etc., are not appropriately. So you definitely want to make sure that it could be directly in the product, it indirectly, but impacting the product. So what kind of product related goals that you would want to take yourself, right? And the same thing can happen for your neighboring locations. It could be for you as an employer. It could be for your supply chain, right? I think what is important here is that there is always a combination of certain pressures that companies are going to be subject to, and this could come in from customers, this could come in from investors, this could come in from uh, you know society, etc. And it is a combination of where they stand with respect to their peers. So a combination of what is urgent and important to your stakeholders and benchmarking exercise that you may want to carry out with respect to your peers could be a starting point to determine how to set up your goals, right? So that's just a high level. A typical goal setting, again, I'm just taking one example of, say, carbon neutrality. And if the idea is to say that we want to be carbon neutral by 2050, then essentially it's important for the company uh, take take a few actions and ensure that by that deadline, if it is 2050, whatever is that period, right? You carry out a series of steps. You first define what is your organizational boundary. What is your scope? Are you going to be covering yourself? Are you going to be covering your warehouses? Are you going to be covering your suppliers? Are you going to be covering your suppliers, right? So it's very important to set up those operational boundaries. Uh, you have to determine your emissions, and there is this GHG protocol that identifies or suggests uh, a standard approach to determining what your emissions are. And then there are a combination of approaches again to determine emissions. So it's not always based on physical information. It's quite possible that it's very difficult for us to have meters located everywhere. It's very difficult for us to determine. So there are tables, there are references that are given, suggest that, okay, if it is of a specific kind of product that is sourced in from country A to country B, then this is the, approximate uh, factor that you use for determining emissions, etc., etc. So there are direct and indirect ways to identify this. Then there is this concept of, what we call as a MAC curve, marginal abatement cost curve, which is to determine how you will then start moving in a very, very practical, feasible manner towards your net zero goals, right? So I could start off with very, very simple initiatives like I only work 5 days a week or 6 days a week and not 7 days a week, right? So automatically I'm saving electricity. It could be that I am improving the efficiency of my manufacturing, and this way I'm reducing my power consumption, right? So there is a series of low hanging fruits um, that probably does not even require any investment from the company's end, to all the way up to significant investments that are needed to make the switch to zero, to net zero carbon. And that could be going all the way up to maybe even changing your factory sometimes, that there is a certain way in which products are manufactured in your current factory that cannot be changed at all, right? To possibly shifting entirely to renewable energy, investing heavily into solar or wind energy, etc. So there is a range, and what the MAC curve does is it allows you to understand what is the level of investment that is required and the benefit that you get from, let us say, that particular initiative that you take. and it orders it from the point of view of the best return on investment, right? That is given. So either you're not making any investment and you're saving power, which comes as the first opportunity, first project, like working 6 days a week, all the way up to maybe changing your plant because there's no other way to make the change, which comes as the last initiative, right? So there is a range, and then there is a cost. There is obviously a time required. There is effort that is going to be spent, and hopefully there is benefit at the end of this, right? So that's basically what the Mac curve does. And then you have specific projects that you could add in addition to your internal projects. You could use your CSR funding very effectively, promote projects that have high offset, generation potential, uh, and then start, figuring out, your carbon footprint. And if nothing can be done, you're going to say that you're going to offset it by either purchasing carbon credits or by, let us say, developing, green zones or green areas, trees and forests and etc. like that, right? Which obviously cannot benefit you on day one. So a typical forest might take 15, 20 years to grow or even more. So you're till that time you are not positive in any case, right? And the effectiveness of that project is also directly dependent on whether all those trees that you planted actually grow and start absorbing the carbon in the way that you plant. So there are these offsets which are there. There are direct initiatives that are there. So you can now imagine, I'm just taking one example of carbon neutrality, which definitely is a very critical goal that everybody has. And it practically changes the way companies actually work going forward. Any new capex investment that you do in the company for business has to go through the lens of carbon neutrality, right? Any new initiative that you take from the point of view of a new project or a new program that is launched in the company, all of these start, looking at, a carbon footprint as a primary criteria. So the shift is not just physical, the shift is also from a mindset perspective. The shift has to be, led by example, top down. And the shift needs to be able to capture all of the efforts and the cost and possibly the benefits that are also flowing in at the same level. So we do have, organizations who develop tools and methodologies to, capture all of these efforts and then study them and start, allowing you to analyze, all of this. But the fact is that this is a very, very long and intense for each of the areas that we would have probably determined here, right? Now, I'm going to talk about a slightly different topic, and this is the pressures that companies are actually facing the last, I would say, couple of years. Again, this is S&P ESG ratings. So S&P, all of us understand, are like Moody's or Fitch or any other credit rating agencies. They have in the last, I would say, 5 years or maybe more, started carrying out ESG ratings for organizations. And they're doing this suo motu, which means that they're doing this on their own, right? So they will look at information that publicly listed companies have posted on their website. They could be policies, they could be sustainability reports, they could be financial reports, they could be any information that companies are talking about in the public domain. They're going to use that as the primary source of input for them, and they are going to rate them on ESG parameters. Now, a score of 56 is actually not a bad score, right? A score of 70 is a very good score. Score of 80 is practically unheard of and above, right? And this is a combination of the E, S, and G parameters. As you can see here, this is all public information. I can share that link with you, and if you just click that link, you could key in any company's information that they have rated on, and any popular company's name that you might know, and there's a fair chance that they've offered a rating. Now, this rating happens in two ways. Either you can allow them to rate you suo motu, which is what has happened in many cases, or you can realize that this is an opportunity for you to showcase how well your ESG thinking and journey is, and participate in what is called as a CSA. So you can see down there's a comment called this company is a CSA survey respondent. So what this means is an S&P actually sends out a survey, a very, very detailed survey, a 100-point survey. And this is where questions are asked about sustainability, questions are asked about resilience, questions are asked about risk, and questions are asked about your commitments towards the ESG parameters, right? And in this particular case, the score is based on, let's say, what Tata Consumer Products have submitted as part of their responses. It's a very, very powerful source of branding. So for companies who've done well, companies who are inching along, the score, I think, they can use this as a way of communicating, especially to their Western counterparts, to their, when I say counterparts, I mean investors as well as customers, that they are serious about this topic. ESG is on the professional, personal work agenda of most CEOs, if not all CEOs, across India and possibly across the globe. And it is something that offers a very, very objective way of trying to move or push your sustainability agenda forward based on those specific dimensions that are considered. I've listed a set of ESG parameters that currently are operational, say, for the pharma industry. But these parameters are largely going to be similar, excepting for maybe 2 or 3 points here that might change with industry and industry. And on each of these dimensions, say, for example, here I can see about 26 dimensions that are talked about. And these 26 dimensions further get broken down into about 100 plus questions. Questions are very direct. Questions are both forward-looking as well as current. The goal that S&P tries to achieve through asking these questions, and these are frequently done. And beauty about this particular exercise is that it's not charged; it is free of cost, which means organizations who are really serious about their sustainability goals or their journey can use this as an opportunity to start showcasing what they're doing. What S&P does indirectly is it first asks you to comment on what is your current situation with respect to each of these areas. It then indirectly challenges you to communicate certain forward-looking commitments and goals. And then it takes it forward and expects you to communicate what is the progress against those commitments, right? So here, the achievement of a goal is not as important as the communication of progress. And that's where, companies have started taking this a lot more seriously. And because the criteria are very objective and it goes all the way up to elements at board level, they talk questions about board independence, board competency, board capability, etc., all the way down to elements of risk management in each of these areas, not just risk management as a topic, which is also there separately under the topic. So, for example, if I look at supply chain management, a lot of the questions are around how supply chain risks are managed and how ESG is ingrained, how ESG criteria are concerned in choices of, choosing your vendors, etc., in the supply chain section, right? So a lot of this stresses or forces companies to communicate more and more about how they are working and to what goals they are actually working towards. And that is where, you know, uh, a lot of companies effort today in terms of bandwidth getting consumed, right? Because whether you like it or not, these scores are going to be up and they're going to be there. And you don't want to not have the best possible score once you know that you're going to be talked about. So that's where a lot of bandwidth is going. Uh, and, but S&P is definitely the leading provider of scores. Apart from this, I've talked about MSCI and Dow Jones Sustainability Index and others too. But S&P is something that is very easily caught on. So when I talk about ESG, I think there are a there are a series of initiatives, as you can see here, that typically could come under the dimensions of ESG. But amongst all this, the one that is the real deal, the one that really matters, the one that companies actually have to work towards is climate risk, right? And when we talk about climate risk, what basically has been recognized is that by the year 2100, uh, it is expected that if no change happens in the way we are currently doing, our carbon footprint is emerging, the way that we consume our resources and generate our emissions, we expect the average temperature of the Earth to go up by 3 to 4.5 degrees Celsius, right, or centigrade, and that is by 2100. And what is also believed that the moment we cross on an average 2% of temperature rise, the Earth itself can start becoming very severely impacted. We already have heard a lot of new terms that have come in, like the El Nino effect, etc., which is a result of climate change. We are talking about glaciers melting as an evidence of climate change. We are talking about unexpected floods, and severe storms and climate events, which is again connected to climate change. And as we approach 2%, 2 degrees or a little more, there is a fair chance that some of the coastal areas across the globe can get flooded. And therefore, when the Paris Agreement happened, about a decade ago, it was very consciously taken into account that all countries, and from countries to all states and then to all organizations, businesses within each of those cities, uh, all have to work towards a goal of uh, less than 1.5 degrees by, uh, actually that should be 2050, right? So this is wrong. This should be 2050. And as a result of which, um, there have been net zero targets that are being taken. I'm sorry, it is 2100 only. But as a result of which, targets have to be taken to ensure that uh, organizations have their carbon neutrality targets, etc., by the year 2050. And that is where we have both Europe and US geographies taking net zero targets for the country, which means that all players within the country, as well as all suppliers to players within the country, within those two continents, are to achieve net zero targets as much as possible by 2050, right? So that is how they have taken their targets. And while all of this is happening, uh, from a risk management perspective, organizations are being asked to talk about two primary risks when it comes to climate. One is what is called as physical risks, and the other is transition risks, right? At a very high level, a physical risk is anything that can impact you physically as a result of climate change. All of us experience this on a regular basis. They could be acute, which means it is occasional, it's not regular, or it could be chronic, like your hot summers or your sea level rise, etc., right? Which are chronic, which are always there, and each year the city or the place gets hotter and hotter. Or it could be transition related risks, which basically means that countries, governments, regulators might start making changes as a result of climate risk, and those changes indirectly or directly can impact organizations across the world, right? In the case of India, for example, a lot of the manufacturing sectors use coal-related boilers for heating, right? And the entire technology that surrounds heating, say for example in pharma companies or in any food companies where substances or material is prepared, that depends on coal boilers, for example. If the regulations say that you have to shift to non-coal based solutions in the next 10 years, it is already very difficult for companies to do, right? And so this way there are changes. The changes could also be to say that you need to have renewable energy as part of a requirement for, say, housing. So it just means that every house has to budget another 5 or 10 lakhs for solar roofs, right? It could be that consumers are putting pressure to say that, where are these coffee beans stored for purchased from? Are they sourced from countries where you employ child labor? Are these sourced from farmlands where uh, chemical pesticides are used? Now, these are questions that come in from consumers, right? So all these become transition risks, and companies are already exposed to several of these as it happens. And the whole idea of climate risk is, in addition to business risk, which you might generally talk about, the expectation is that every organization carves out, shows their climate risks in a very explicit manner, going all the way up to, you know, uh, quantifying that risk. So with this, companies have started working very heavily on getting their carbon footprint understood. Carbon footprint primarily is through a combination of scope 1 to 3 and the GHG emissions. This itself is a very, very big task. Takes it takes months to determine this for the first time, and then it again takes months to refresh this every year. So organizations are working very hard towards this. They are employing consultants to get these working. They're using tools to make this happen. And that's the path that companies are currently taking. And all this is connected to just the topic of E, right, which is the environment. When it comes to India, I think India is now believed to be the third largest emitter of GHG gases after China and the US. And as you can see here from this McKinsey report, coal is the biggest contributor to this. And when you're talking about coal, you're talking about the core industry, right? Oil and gas, iron and steel, cement. These are core infrastructural industries where greenhouse gas emissions are the largest. And these are companies who are in this sector are going to be impacted the most. Most of the companies in the coal industry, for example, are government companies. So the pressure is back on the government. As you can see here, uh, countries who've taken net neutral targets are, US and Europe. Europe is a little more aggressive. They say that by 2035, US would, achieve 50% neutrality, and by 2050, 100%. Whereas EU says they will achieve 55% neutrality by 2030 and 100% by 2050. India has understood that it's not going to be easy for them, so they have committed to a 2070 without any intent, right? And what would this mean? This would mean all of these industries that are there have to start working towards their respective goals. Only then India's goal gets achieved, right? Besides the states and besides the cities. So from that point of view, essentially, KPMG had run a survey in end of 2022, and they've shared the expectations and findings from CEOs across India. And what they've understood is that if ESG expectations are not met, there are going to be a bunch of downsides. At the same time, CEOs also acknowledge that it is going to be very difficult for them to implement ESG strategies for a bunch of reasons over the next, say, 3 years or so, right? Starting with lack of budgets, to clarity on what is specific regulations are required, to other economic and cost related pressures, right, which basically come in from this. I will share, the sources here, but then I can share this again separately. But finally, in terms of, let us say, how does all of this connect back to our topic of today? This is a Deloitte report, a very recent Deloitte report where they've tried to connect sustainability and strategy together. And they've identified a few risk themes. Some of these we can relate to by now. We've looked at physical climate risk. We understand that these could generate strategic operational risks as well. And your risk management, your PCM cycles, all of them help finally to deal with some of these elements. As we move forward from, say, looking at risk from a 12-month to 18-month horizon, to moving it to a 5-year horizon, and finally to a decadal horizon, right? A lot of risk events are going to play out, and I think the connect between risk resilience and sustainability has never been more stronger today than ever before. Um, the idea here really is to be able to appreciate the fact that each of these disciplines in the past have been different, but they are all tying in together now. Whether you call it as EHS, who today are the primary advocates of sustainability, or the BCM team's primary advocates of resilience, or the ERM team's primary advocate of risk management and emerging risk identification, or the strategy teams that are looking at long-term direction of businesses. All of these are now required to look in at sustainability together through their respective lenses, through their time horizons, and work collaboratively, if not together in one team, right? They at least have to collaborate with each other, and that's how we are looking at all of this interconnect. So with that, I conclude today's session. Sorry, I had to rush through the last set of slides, but look forward to securing any questions that might be there, Krishnan, aside, or we could always take it up in the next week if there is any time constraint.
Thank you very much, Anand. This was very interesting. Deep dive is required. A lot of thinking is required before we take the next step in this direction. ESG is so important. Sustainability, I have been saying myself, is not just the environment. Well, most of us in the past, the moment we thought sustainability, we started thinking of carbon footprint, environment emissions, etc. I say it's the overall sustainability of the business. And the moment we say business, then we bring resiliency into picture. We bring people into picture. And I say in the past, the statement was people make companies. I say resilient people make resilient companies. Resilient companies make resilient communities and societies, and resilient societies make the resilient planet. And this is the overall picture of sustainability. And then ESG is the way forward. Unfortunately, we do not have time for questions today. My proposal is that in one of the next sessions, either within this series or on top of the series, we keep full hour just for questions. We do not talk presentation, but we just keep the floor open for questions, and then we have thorough discussions around this. I also agree with this. Perhaps a full day is required for these discussions. So maybe we'll have to have multiple sessions. Any views from you, Krishnan, and before we close?
Of course. So this is, when you look at a BAU, a business continuity management, as far as our regular organizations in India are concerned, this is pretty much out. It's pretty new as such. It's not part of your regular BCM discussions which you have at work day to day. So yeah, it is new to me, and I think it'll take some time to digest and yeah, as you said, sustainability, when we hear sustainability, we are talking about water, carbon footprints, etc. All the neutral goals, 2050, 2070, 2100, all these are things what run through our mind. But of course, how it connects into the governance part of ESG, yes, that is something that there has been some lights thrown on that today. And yes, I think there is a lot of thinking required that needs to be done here. Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Anand.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And in the interest of time, I would like to close the session. To all our viewers, listeners, we look forward to seeing you next Saturday, 10 a.m. IST, with our weekly show, Yin and Yang of Risk and Resilience, from Anand and from myself. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.